All right. So Robert or Dennis, which one wants to do the roll call for us?
I got
tonight?
it.
Okay.
Miss Pecora,
He's here somewhere.
Roxanne. I heard you. All right.
She's muted, but she's here.
Okay, Mr. Gidali.
I'm here.
I'm here.
And by the way, Dennis, we decided we found a new substitute for you.
Okay, Mr. Cohen.
Present.
Excellent. Mr. McCarthy.
He's present.
And driving. Mr. Hanson.
Pay attention to the road.
Okay, I heard Mr. Hanson's here.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Cindy's excused. Mr. Brand. Let me see if he's in the attendees room. Hang on a sec. He might have jumped in. Yep, he is. I'm gonna promote him. There we go. Mr. Brand, you're here, right?
I am here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Where are we go? Up to Ms. Gatto.
On the floor.
Here.
I'm gonna go to the table over there.
Mr. Bogus.
I'm here.
Mr. Wilkin.
Here.
Mr. Wilkin.
Here.
Mr. Baden.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Ferraro.
Here.
Ms. Welton.
Here.
Mr. Watkins.
Here.
Mr. Almquist.
Here.
Mr. Markowitz. Mr. Rudokoff. Mr. Travers. Mr. Murray.
Here.
Mr. McLaughlin.
Here.
And City Kingston is vacant. I saw Johanna Weiner. I don't know if she was appointed or not.
She's on the agenda for this month's meeting.
Okay, so Ms. Weiner, you're not officially on the board yet, but you can hang out in the attendees. All right. We have a quorum.
All right. Thank you, Robert. All right. Hopefully everybody got a chance to read the minutes. Are there any comments or make a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to accept them, McLaughlin.
All right.
Chris the second.
All right. Thank you. Okay. All those opposed? And any abstention?
Who was the second on that? I'm sorry.
Almquist.
Frank?
Thank you, Mr. Almquist.
I'm abstaining because I was not at the meeting. Welton.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, motion approved for the minutes. Anybody got any educational or training opportunities to bring up?
Yeah, there's New York Planning Federation is doing their twice a year training. They're doing it this year over at Hyde Park at the Roosevelt site. It is, you could still, I looked today, you can still sign up. It is on the 13th of next Tuesday.
I gotta sign up for that.
If you're a member, if your town is a member, it's $90. It's a full day's worth of training. Also to pass on, Pace University, the deadline is passed. For sign up, but I did get another email just this week about announcing it. So the deadline was the 28th. They're doing one of their 3-day land use leadership alliance trainings. They're doing it at the Rosendale Community Center. And it is a 3 6-hour day session. I will tell you, having done it previously, it is a very intensive deep dive. This year, the topics are sort of very near and dear to us, which is why they're doing it where they are. It's about the Rondout and the Esopus Creek watershed areas. They're looking for people to sign up from the communities that are within those watershed areas and reach out to Tiffany. I can't think of her last name. Or you can email me and I'll send you.
Zazullo.
Thank you. So it is free. It's a very intensive class and you'll come out of it a little overwhelmed and very knowledgeable on the topic when you're done. So though it's 3 let me get the dates for everybody. Because if you miss one, it's really not worth doing it. But they're gonna be held September 22nd, October 6th, and October 20th from 9 to 3 each day. So
Okay, thanks, Mike.
those are the ones that I know about. So
Yeah, I was gonna say the planning federation meeting was good last year. I'm signed up. I'll be there this year. So folks that can make that should.
yeah, I think it's 3 or 4 different classes during the course of the day. I think
Yeah.
it's like a full 6 hours of training.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, there's one from Smart Growth that's about using geographic databases to help with planning using GIS type of, it's on September 13th and it's online. It's at 1 p.m.
Was that the one Mary Ann shared today, Amanda?
That's the very one.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on, how about community reports?
I actually have a report from Gardner, Drew.
Okay,
Thank you. Just wanted to let people know the Gardner Town Board voted to accept a community preservation plan and the development of a community preservation fund to preserve open space, farmland, and water resources. And that will be on the ballot in November. And people are promoting this right now in Gardner. We're using what happened in New Paltz a couple of years ago as a model, and the New Paltz people have been very helpful to us. So I just wanted to report that.
okay, thanks, Glenn. Anyone else?
Yeah, I guess
Oh, go ahead, Vince. Sorry.
I guess I'll do it now. I'm going through the background check process right now, but once it's complete, I'm being appointed by the governor to the New York State Developmental Disabilities Planning Council. I wanted to share with my colleagues on the planning board. No, I'm not going anywhere. Can't get rid of me that quick, but no, once the background check is complete, then I'll be sworn in and I'll be going up to it'll be like 6 times a year, they're saying. So that'll probably happen starting the next couple of months, give or take, how things in the state are going. And the other thing is the village authorities they're repaving Partition Street from Main down all the way to the bottom of the hill where they're doing that Central Hudson gas main replacement project. They're going to be back out there tomorrow and hopefully have it wrapped up. They're paving over where they did all that work. So patience is certainly appreciated.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, first, Vince, congratulations. And Vince used me as a reference for that. And they did call and I was very happy to give a good recommendation to Vince for that state group. Learned a lot about what they do and how they meet in the process. The woman I actually spoke for almost a half an hour. So Town of Rochester, at our last meeting, we went through adopting 2 ambulance districts for our town. One that covers the High Falls area, which Marbletown First Aid has traditionally served. And the second is the bulk of the rest of our town. There's a small portion that is covered by a third ambulance, but we went through permissive referendum potential and none was called for. So at the last meeting, we adopted those 2 districts and they will go into effect January 1.
Good. All right, I got a couple of things on the town of Olive. Within the last couple of weeks, we launched I'll call it a Town of Olive emergency alert system. It's powered by Civic Ready. Trying to get everybody to sign up for it, but there's several things you can do with it, getting either text message, email, or actually a phone call. about emergencies in town, road closings, flooding, things of that nature. And even simple things like the pool's closed today due to something, those type of things. I also mentioned, we've got a referendum on the 24th of this month for the sewer district in the hamlet of Shokan. I hope, got our fingers crossed that passes. And I think that's about it. Anyone else?
Are you going to build a sewage treatment plant, or how is it going to be set up?
Well, the way right now we have a sewer district in Boyceville. And the plans that have been looked at for a number of years now as a sewer district in Shokan, which would encompass about, give or take, 500 properties. Probably 475 of those are actually developed. And there would be a plant built in Shokan. And the plant in Boyceville would be converted to a pumping station and pump their sewage up to that plant in Shokan.
Okay,
So it's a pretty big endeavor.
yeah. How long will it take to, if it passes, how long do they expect to take to build?
Well, I hate to say anything because I know how this is going to go. I would say we're probably a good 2 years out from construction, and then at least 2 years, maybe 3 for construction. So I think they're looking at 4 or 5 years before it's online.
Hey, Drew, this is Matt Rudikoff. How you doing? Sorry, everyone, I'm late, but I'm here now, and I just may have missed it. But Drew, did you mention, or is it material that wasn't DEP, New York City DEP, involved in the Boyceville system? Will they be involved in this other system?
Oh yeah, but they're paying for it.
Oh, great.
DEP's paying for the whole shooting match. The estimate that I've seen was 48 million. I suspect when we go out for bids, it's going to be more than that, but just because the cost of everything's gone up since that cost was put out there. There's quite a few easements involved. It's mostly a gravity fed system in Shokan, but there are some pumping stations and there will be easements required. Matter of fact, one of my property is going to need an easement for one of the gravity collection lines. So, okay, any other community reports?
Drew, when was the referendum going to be? Sorry.
September 24th.
And that's going to be by ballot at elections?
It's just, well, we were hoping the county Board of Elections would help us, but they basically say, we're too busy, we can't help you on this, so we're doing it ourselves. So it'll be just the property owners within the Shokan Sewer District that are allowed to vote. And the way it works, which is kind of weird, you as a property owner, you get one vote no matter how many properties you own. The same with, like, if an LLC owns the property, they get just one vote. So now, if to explain a little further, if a married couple, they own the property together, then each of them get a vote. So it's going to be interesting. There's lawyers involved with this. Everything goes through CWC, which is the Catskill Watershed Corporation. And there's lawyers that work on this that are guiding us through how to do this correctly and properly. So, and absentee ballots are allowed and all that. So.
Well, good luck with that.
Yes. I'll be glad when it's over because it's stressful. Because it changes. At the same time we're doing this, we're trying to work on getting a comprehensive plan, and whether that passes or fails will change a lot of that comprehensive plan stuff that we're working on.
Well, Jan Dakin is looking to revisit our sewage treatment plant issue, which was voted down, and a lot of people are rethinking that now.
That's the one in Phoenicia?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe I should send some people that are against it here down to the Phoenicia people to talk about that.
Well, the main issue is that we cannot expand the business district without having more sewage potential, and we don't without the sewage treatment plant.
Right. Okay, moving on, planning board reports. I don't have any report as a chairman, and there's no committees. So with that, we move on to Dennis and your reports for the planning department.
Thank you, Chair Barnes. Appreciate it. A couple things. One is on the financial report. We're looking in pretty good shape with respect to the end of the year. We have some material that we're moving forward on relative to the Transportation Council. That we have two projects moving forward on that, and we're in the middle of budget season, and so the conversation around budget has been generally to hold staff constant, so we're not asking for any additional staff, but we are looking at a substantial increase in budget as it relates to other things that we're going to be doing, and that's particularly with relationship to housing. You should know that does anybody have any questions in terms of the financial, where we are from a financial perspective? Okay, so let me move on and just talk about some of the things that influence our financing. One is that we did receive an award relative to our application for funding for a update for the Ag Farmland Protection Plan. So that award is we're waiting for the contract. It's $50,000 with a 50% match, so it's be $100,000 work to update the county's farmland protection plan. We're also in discussions with the legislature with respect to the use of ARPA funds. That's the American Rescue Plan funds. They are proposing to pass a resolution that would essentially direct ARPA funds to begin an agricultural assistance program. And they would start that, running it through a contract with the planning department that would begin to hire a consultant to essentially look at how to work with the farmers in terms of the things that have happened relative to the pandemic. And that's particularly as it relates to the cost of food and the cost of seed, the cost of fertilizer, and the cost of fuel. So they're looking at a grant program that we would be participating in. And then they're looking at a possible position at the end of a year's time that, depending upon how this worked out, it would be either in the planning department, the economic development department, or a whole new agricultural department. We don't know yet, but that's the first piece of it is probably going to end up in our laps somewhere down the line. The other thing that they're looking at is on the housing side. We're looking at probably a substantial amount of funding devoted to housing, and that housing would likely be funded through a housing trust fund, which would capture dollars from the current idea is to capture dollars from the tax sales that Ulster County holds, the tax auctions, to commit to the money that we make on those tax sales. If we make more money than taxes owed, that would be committed. The second piece of funding would be commit money from the room tax. And the third piece of funding would be to commit funding from the county's fund balance whenever that fund balance is over the estimated fund balance needed to essentially satisfy the bond councils that we have a sufficient fund balance. And there's a formula involved in that, and I don't want to get into it, but and those are resolutions that are winding their way through the legislature right now. And we've been asked to comment on a number of those resolutions and working back through the county executive's office relative to that. There are a number of other discussions ongoing that may affect our budget or our financial picture in terms of what we would be responsible for, but they are far less further along, and I'm not sure whether they'll make it through the budget season to anything that we would be aware of. The legislature is looking at a substantial, and that been documented by the controller, is looking at a substantial fund balance that is over and above what we usually carry. And so they're in a spending mood, I guess, is the best way to put it. And we'll see what happens with respect to that. We are, quite frankly, out of space to put people here. And I'll leave it at that. With respect to other things that were, well, why don't we stop there and go on to communications? Does anybody have any questions about that?
So,
Amanda?
yeah, just, and this may be totally, and I'm not asking this in the right place or context, but is the county looking at any opportunities from the IRA funding to expand transmission lines so that more solar farms can more easily hook into the current? I mean, we just don't have access here in New Paltz to take solar on our landfill and hook into the transmission lines. So are there any programs like that, or any thoughts on anything like that?
The short answer is no. And while I think the county is receptive to solar development, I don't think the county is receptive to helping this utility do anything. I think the county's been in several spats with the utility, particularly with its rates, and also with respect to its response to the ice storm. I'm not convinced that there's a will of the elected, certainly at the previous executive level, to essentially enter into any kind of assistance to the utility. And I'll just leave it at that. But I understand what Amanda's talking about is the interchange charges that get charged to solar companies in terms of them hooking up to the grid. And those interchange charges or connection charges can be substantial. And then Central Hudson actually maps out what they think that they can add to the grid based on the various power lines that they have. And so that's what causes some problems. We lost a site up in Saugerties on the basis that the interconnection charge, where we thought we had the ability to interconnect relatively easily, the interconnection charge estimated by Central Hudson was $1 million.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, so that the site was dropped from consideration given that interconnection charge.
Yeah, but in our town, if you don't have the high tension wires run through your town, they can't hook it up to the system at all. And what we're doing is we have one or two, and it overloads the system, and no other ones can go in.
Yep.
So it is a problem, and the utilities are going to have to do something about it. They're going to have to address it somehow.
Dennis, any more update on the communications towers?
So we had a conversation. We're currently working through some concerns with respect to Saugerties. Even though that tower is constructed, there's been some concerns expressed by the residents that it's more visible than they thought it would be. So we're working through those concerns. And we had discussions with the town of Rosendale with respect to their government center up behind their government center. They're receptive to that. I need to issue an RFP relative to bringing consultants on board for that. As it stands now, we are still looking at towers in Shandaken. The tower that's most at risk, Michael, that would affect you, Supervisor Baden, is the one in Rochester, as to whether or not it's actually needed or not needed. So that's
Well,
the one that they're
We have no
taking-
broadband or cell service in that whole area, so
yeah.
take it for what
I
it's
think
worth.
unfortunately, you do have service from the public safety radio system. So that's the one that's most at risk right now,
Yeah,
but other ones
okay.
we definitely need.
Yeah, okay.
Dennis, quick question. On the housing front, is there any talk of
Yeah.
increasing housing opportunities for veterans? Because I'm hearing a lot. I'll just leave it there.
So the short answer is that the county does have a current supportive housing service for veterans in Kingston. That has been unable to essentially, I shouldn't say unable, it's a small facility. It's about 8 or 10 beds, as I recall. But they have a difficulty relative to attracting veterans, and they actually have gone out of the county to attract some veterans into that facility. As it's my understanding. I haven't confirmed that. That's my understanding. But in general, veterans fall into that class, those classes of people like elderly and disabled, that they would receive special consideration under certain affordable housing projects. So the short answer is yes, Vince, but not specifically that I'm aware of any targeted veterans housing projects that I'm aware of.
All right, thank you.
Dennis, out of curiosity, how's the Alms project coming? Alms House?
Alms House is set to open. They portions of it are already rented up. The new portions of it, which are the new building, which is adjacent to the Route 9W extension, that is set to open, I think, the end of this month, or certainly soon, certainly before the first of the year. That's set to open. They're currently finishing up a lot of things that they had to finish up. But my understanding is that they've completed the lottery, and they're just waiting for to complete to start the residents moving in.
Thank you.
Okay. So on communications, I don't have any, or environmental notices and grant opportunities, I don't have anything to add in those.
So
Anybody
I had
have
one
any question?
question
Dennis, I
about,
think you got one more question, yeah.
yeah, maybe it's
I'm
on
sorry,
communication.
Amanda.
That's okay. Can you give us any update on what's going on with the process for choosing the emergency response center location?
It's ongoing. How's that for the update?
Well, we could use those jobs in New Paltz.
It's tied up in the legislature,
I would say
Amanda.
if you're really interested in New Paltz, you need to lobby the legislature that's where it should go, because it's ongoing right now.
Okay, thank you.
It's
And
been
that's kind of the
stuck.
flip side of the housing situation is having good jobs that aren't just, yeah.
Well, not for nothing. In terms of public safety needs, the current EOC and the current what they call PSAP, which I don't know what it stands for, but it's 911. It's the 911 facility, is woefully dated, and in need of replacement. It's almost an emergency in and of itself. And we found this out when the ice storm hit, just how fragile we were. We were on generator up there for a number of days because there was no power in Kingston, and there's no backup power to the EOC. To the PSAP except for generator. And we were down at one point in time. We were down on the connections that allow us to answer phones the lines had all dropped and we were down to one. So, I mean, one of the things that we learned from that was that the redundancy needed for telecommunications and for power was significant. And that's why when we started site selection, we started to prioritize not only the buildability of the site, but also the amount of redundancy that was in the site. And that's one of the reasons that New Paltz rose to the top, is that we could figure out a way that we could get power from two different substations. One would be the Ohioville substation, which is right next to the facility. And the same way we could get telecommunications from two different locations as well. And that played very much into the lessons learned from the most recent ice storm. And it also, quite frankly, played very much into the decision in terms of whether or not Golden Hill was a preferred site versus a site that should be ranked lower than the New Paltz site, even though it was more convenient for a government operations center to essentially be located in the Kingston urbanized area.
Dennis, have the issues? Sorry.
The discussion now is about how much the property's worth.
Has
big-
it gotten out of committee though, that it will be on their agenda on the 18th of?
To
Okay,
the best of my knowledge, know that I'm not privy to all the discussions that are going on at the executive level, but to the best of my knowledge, I have not seen a resolution come out
okay.
that suggests that we would, but there may be a resolution that comes in to make the October meeting.
Right. So
even if we
Amanda,
do
it
this
was,
in
I'll be a little sort of less diplomatic than Dennis. It was pulled at the last meeting from the legislature agenda at the request of the county executive's office, but that was to resolve questions that the legislature has brought up. The holdup is currently on seeker. Whether the legislature is lead agency and or not lead agency, but doing a neg deck. The holdup is on, as Dennis said, on the cost of the property itself. And that's really the two major sticking issues with the next steps. So,
Yeah, I did hear there were two different evaluations and they were not close.
There were two different appraisals and they're millions of dollars apart,
Mhm.
which is unusual for commercial appraisal.
Yeah. Okay,
So
we,
that's
we all need to go.
that's public knowledge, by the way. So I'm not giving anything away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dennis,
Who's
you have
that county
anything on?
executive now? When does Ryan leave?
My understanding is that that County Executive Ryan will resign on Thursday, I believe.
Tomorrow?
And a new county executive will be appointed the
It's
next
Friday.
day.
It's Friday, the 9th.
No, he will resign on Thursday, I think at just before midnight. And then the new executive is appointed on Friday. I'm pretty sure.
I was in
If
the
not,
law.
it's just, if not, he's going to resign tonight.
Yeah.
And it news. I know that the schedule is a just before midnight resignation and an appointment the next day of a new county executive
it's,
who is acting.
Mhm.
it's waiting on the certification of the special election from all the boards of elections.
Still not certified?
I don't think so, Mike. I
Is
think
it completed now?
I believe
Okay.
he's proposed that he's going to be sworn in on the
Okay.
13th.
Because
That-
originally they
these are
said
all
they needed two.
third-hand
weeks.
conversations,
Hold
but I
on,
know I've
hold
seen
on.
the invitation to the signing in ceremony for the acting
Okay.
county executive.
You know
So
more
that's
than I
pretty-
do then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where we are.
All right, Dennis, how about director or staff reports?
I think I just did that. So
Okay,
I'm
good.
fine. Yep.
All right, how about special topics then?
Two things on special topics. One is that we currently have just received approval for construction of the Kingston Rail Trail. So that it went to the feds for obligation, and I'm looking forward, and there's resolutions in front of the legislature to expand the capital project. So hopefully we'll be to bid by the end of this month to construct the Kingston Rail Trail, which runs from Washington Avenue out to 209. So hopefully that'll occur. And then the second topic of special discussion I want the board to think about is I attended a Conservation Advisory Council roundtable in Rosendale, where they bring together all the Conservation Advisory Council members and sort of talk about what they do and what they do best and what's on their minds. And I was thinking that rather than have a sort of the most difficult, I think, problem we have with respect to our training programs is, for some reason, local planning board members have no desire to speak or ask questions at those events. And I was thinking about emulating the Conservation Advisory Council's roundtable and invite planning board members to come and actually speak about what their board is doing, what projects are out there, how they approach certain things, and then ask, as part of that invitation, ask various boards to give presentations if they like, and say take a half an hour of presentations and maybe an hour of roundtable discussion. And I wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Sounds like a very good idea to me. I think you're right about planning board.
Would the presentations be vetted in any way, Dennis? Because I worry when you have essentially lay people doing a presentation that it could be incorrect information.
Okay, then we could
That's just
schedule a
a-
presentation about some item but I'd want to do it about something that somebody is doing or something that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad
I mean-
idea. I'm just saying whatever they're going to present should be vetted in some way by either you or the
Yeah.
board or something, just so we know what they're doing.
Agreed.
Okay, I'm fine.
Because in the executive meeting, we were discussing how a lot of boards do things the way they've always done it. And it kind of turns out that they're not the proper way of doing things. And, bad habits get ingrained, and then, so that would be my only concern.
And that's all I have. If nobody has anything else to add.
I just have a question, and that is there a plan that we're gonna be coming back, meeting in person soon?
The short answer is it depends upon what the governor does, and you know that, Vince, as well as I do. If the governor decides that she doesn't want to expand the emergency order, then my sense is that we would be coming back together because of that lack of expansion. We don't have the technology to essentially, the other way to do this is you can do streaming work as the legislature does. I just don't have the technology or the wherewithal to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that what ends up happening is that we would end up with in an in-person meeting. But I would say to you that if the governor continues to extend the executive order, then we would continue to meet by Zoom.
All right. Robert, do we have anyone waiting that's in the public that wants to speak?
Let's find out. All right, if you would like to speak, now is our public comment session. Please raise your hand and we'll recognize you. I see it's 2 planning board alternates and somebody called call-in user 1. Nope, doesn't look like anybody's raising their hand. So
Okay, all right, then I think if somebody else has any other thing to talk about, we can move on to zoning referrals.
All right.
Hey, Robert, it's all yours.
all right.
The first one is in Ellenville with the 130 Canal Street. Anybody recusing?
Let me share my screen.
Right.
All right. Everybody sees the presentation?
Yes.
Excellent. All
Are
right.
you doing these two together, right?
I am. All special permit site plan combos I will do as one.
Okay.
Let me just bring that up. So here's our location. There we go. So that's our site in question. You have an existing carriage house here. It is in a historic district. The site plan you're going to see is going to flip it on its side. So everything's going to be upside down once you see it. But access will be from here to existing curb cuts. This parking will remain. There'll be additional parking here. There's going to be tent in over here, and there'll be access to the canal house. You're going to see some images to this. There's been extensive landscaping plans with the idea of noise mitigation for this project. And also, so they've done noise analysis and also with landscaping in mind. We do have some comments on both those topics. I'll go back to the PowerPoint.
Rob, can you point out before you go back, can you point out the residential area?
There are some residents. So just real quick, just to show you the zoning here. So, I mean, it is all this residence office district that it's in, and it boundaries the B1 district. So while it's allowed, you do have.
Rob, what's being proposed? I don't know.
It's
if I
an
missed it.
events. It's an events facility, wedding
Okay,
venue.
thank you.
So what you have, so you do have, for example, those in there are residences. That's commercial, but also again, you have residences in there. So it's a mix, you know, it's kind of downtown, but it's a mix of uses.
Thanks, Rob.
All right, no problem. Come on. Careful. There you go. So, like I said, so it's a renovated existing carriage house, convert for use as a wedding venue. They're expanding the parking. They've hired an event planner, and each event has to have an event planner. They also hired an acoustic audio design, noise mitigation company, and a landscape architect, all with the idea that they're going to mitigate sounds. They do have a security plan where it'll have at least one security staff for each 100 and 2 for 100 persons or more. There'll be no outdoor music, amplified sounds, or formal events outdoors after 9 p.m. under any condition. Volumes will be controlled internally and meet the village noise ordinance. Like I said, they're going to be doing some landscaping design at the borders to mitigate noise. We have some comments about that, especially with respect to thoughtfulness regarding native species, lack thereof. Maximum is 210 guests, even though this square footage would actually allow 306. They will have guest shuttles, because they're only having 40 parking spaces. It is an ADA compliant site. All right, so this is an overarching site plan. So you can see it was flipped around here. So now you're going, what it looks like north is south. What looks like east is west. So just to let you know. Okay, so again, let me annotate this. So again, access, existing access. This is your additional parking area. You have a tent for catering over in here, and this is your actual tent here. They do have procedures in there and as part of their narrative about what they'll be doing and when, but there's nothing in there regarding, is the tent permanent? Will they be taking down tent? Where does the tent up and down fit into that schedule? So we'll have an advisory comment about that. There's some more drawings here, and I'll go through them. Oh, and you can see there is a bus drop-off location as well as right in front here, and there's you'll see an image of this path. So the bus does not go through the parking lot, but has a designated drop-off location. And that walkway there, that's the walkway they'll be seeing right after they get dropped off at the bus. This is your landscaping plan. Comment is going to be mix in some more native species while also trying to mitigate noise. Lighting is all full cutoff, dark sky compliant. Mostly low line kind of bollard style lighting. There is some parking lot lighting in there. And this is just a traffic circulation plan, which shows they'll be coming in, swinging around. And here as well. And they also have fire truck radii in here as well. And these are just some elevations.
This is in the historic district, right, Rob?
Right, so we'll need what is it? Letter of what did I call it? I have it in my comments. So comments are emergency. I just want emergency response to review their access and make sure and their emergency plan in case of emergency. Landscaping the native species. They'll need historic review from their Historic Preservation Commission. And our
And SHPO as well, by the way. They need SHPO as well.
And SHPO as well, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Sustainability comment respect to looking at alternative energies, meeting stretch energy goals, things of that nature. And then the comment I made about when does the tent come out? Does it come down? Things of that nature. Mr. Murray, you had a question.
Yeah, just quickly, they made mention of a shuttle. Where are they shuttling from, and do they have permission to take their overflow to other aspects or other parts of the village?
Now, I do not know the answer to that question. There are a number of municipal lots in the village, so perhaps that, but they do not indicate that as far as I could find in their materials.
They got 40 parking spaces, so they're kind of okay for around 100, given the on-street parking that's available. But once we get past that, one would presume that where they're shuttling from, since they didn't indicate that they're probably shuttling from the municipal lots.
Can we put this in the advisory to make? it
Absolutely.
clear?
That's
we'll make it in the comment. They'll say
That's a
they-
great.
They should identify where the shuttle lots are. And that they have adequate capacity at those off-site lots.
Robert, this is Drew. What is the carriage house itself used for? Is that where the weddings have been or
It's a bit of both. It looks like they're doing indoor and outdoor. So.
Okay.
Is the carriage house going to be expanded?
No. Doesn't look like it.
Thought I saw something that said an existing, the first two sections. Where are you? Part of it looked like it was being added to.
You mean over in here?
In through here. Where
It
says
doesn't show
vertical.
that way on the site plan that I can see.
Yeah, it was confusing to me too.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. I mean, I can go back to the aerial real quick and just to take a peek. It looks like it's the same footprint to me.
Yeah.
The
it's-
aerial.
You can,
You can see.
All right.
Okay.
All right. So those are our comments, and we'll add the comment about where the alternative site busing parking lots are.
and Rob, I want to add
And SHPO.
one other advisory comment if we can. And that's the service entrance is off of Herman Street, which is that little street on the side into the carriage house.
Mm-hmm.
And we just want to make sure that service entrance, that they understand what's going to happen with respect to that service entrance along there.
Can you clarify what you mean by what's going to happen there?
Truck parking, double parking on Herman Street. That's. So up in here, I'm sorry, Rob, up in here, we have a
Okay,
service
I see
entrance
it.
up
I
in
see it.
here.
I see it. Yeah.
What's going to happen along the street? That's what we want to know.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Motion to approve staff comments, Mike Baden.
Second, McCarthy.
All right. Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all those opposed? And any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Very good. Okay, now we're on to Esopus with the Red Maple Vineyard. Any recusals?
Yeah, I have to recuse.
All right, Roxanne, thank you. Okay, Robert?
All right, so this is associated with the Red Maple Winery, but not actually on the same site. I'll zoom out a little bit. So southbound Ulster West Park. And let me just bring up this layer here, because you're right near the town of Lloyd boundary. But this is the site here on the west side. This is the existing winery. I'm moving my mouse around and not actually annotating. So this is the existing winery in here, but what we're actually talking about comes off of here and goes up this side road, existing farm road, which is going to become gravel, and is kind of nestled between this mature tree line and this rock outcropping in here. And apparently they have a deal with there's something with Scenic Hudson in there where they can't expand it in there. And I think we should also, given that you might have some historic views across the river, we should make a comment that says maintain this this buffer so we don't run into any view shed issues. These are mature trees in there. Okay. But what they're doing, and I'll go to my PowerPoint, is a new structure. It's about 8,400 square feet, winery, brewing, and cider making operation. There'll be a retail component and tap room with 80 seats, a 25 space gravel parking area, and then the existing winery, new building. There's existing winery that's across the street. New buildings have a separate entrance off Burroughs Drive. And like I said, it's a separate parcel from the existing operation. And I mentioned there was something to the effect of Scenic Hudson, Scenic Hudson has restrictions on the site and further growth is not allowed. There are 300 yards from their nearest neighbor. It's surrounded by mature trees and an 18-foot tall rock outcropping on the eastern side of the building. Let's see that. Okay, down there.
Yeah, the part of the problem is we can't confirm any of those locations or anything on this site plan.
All right. What do you mean?
Well, there may be an 18-foot rock outcropping, but you couldn't find it on the site plan anywhere.
Well, I mean, you do have considerable topo right here.
Yeah.
If you look at it, Dennis.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Right here it goes. What's that? There's no indication of that tree line in there at all. I don't know where that is. Not in the site plan anyway. Anyway, let's see. That's what it's proposed. This is a zoom in. This is your sewage detention as SDS right in there. Again, you can't really see anything with respect to landscaping. They say something about landscape block bluestone retaining wall at the edge of this parking lot. And there's a proposed well and water line and lateral. Well, let me clear my annotations. I don't think I did. All right. And this is more than 1,000 feet, but they do have a turnaround in there. This drive. And I believe this is a landscaping lighting plan, but I don't have an actual, I don't have lighting levels. I don't have cut sheets of what those lighting actually are, whether they're dark sky compliant, full cutoff, et cetera, et cetera. I have no idea about what that is. Apparently there's some sort of, what is that? Horseshoe pit? Apparently there's a horseshoe pit and fire pit on the property, it looks like. Yeah, I didn't notice that before, just until now.
What are your recommendations?
Yeah, let me move on.
One of the documents said there was a handball court too.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's handball courts shown on the site plan.
Yeah. Interesting. So health department approvals, given that we are having a brewing operation, it would seem that there should be a pump test and look at the water supply to support the property should be conducted. I don't have any information regarding that. Lighting level should be established, all dark sky compliant. Sustainability issues. I know the town of Esopus has adopted the stretch energy
Stretch
code.
code.
Yeah, they've adopted it. They've got mentioned back in one of our previous referrals. We did not know that they had actually adopted it based on our comments before, but they can still look into ways to make this more energy efficient. And then, like I said, for maintain existing vegetation, not boundaries, existing vegetation to retain to keep the visual impacts to at a minimum. And if we want to go on further, we can require visual impact analysis if there is any, but given that there are mature trees in front of it, there's likely not.
Well, then that gets to that 18-foot rock outcrop that they say is there as well.
Yeah.
Rob, with the,
Or staff, the black one.
Second, Welton.
Okay, so we got
Rob, with the proximity to the river, does SHPO, I don't know what's directly across the Hudson. Is there any issue with SHPO with any of the?
Roosevelt. I'm not
sites?
Roosevelt. I mean, what you call it? Hang on, I'll show you.
Vanderbilt, we looked at the Vanderbilt and Roosevelt to see where it was.
It's kind of northwest of there. I mean,
Okay.
yeah,
It's
you
not
know,
directly across.
this is this area. This is
It's not,
the site. Vanderbilt's about.
yeah, it's not proximate enough to
It's-
be a problem
it's
then.
not
I'm
really.
just,
This is downtown Hyde Park over here. You
okay.
know. It's here,
Okay.
maybe even over there, I think is where it is. So it's not a direct view from.
Okay,
So Rob, you looked at the site and you can't tell us if there's a mature tree there or not?
I haven't been
Are
on.
they-
I
are
haven't
they
been on
trying-
the site itself.
Okay, are they
understand.
trying to block something where they're putting it? What's the reason for it being over there?
Well, it's view shed, so they have. You can see that there is a tree line here.
Right, correct.
So, and this is
So, I mean, just, it's really difficult to locate the site here because
Okay.
there's no existing condition map at all that we could find.
Okay,
So, but
Okay.
looking at this looks like the handball courts. So the site is back in here.
and you're right behind that
Right.
house in the front, right?
Yeah, but what they seem to be saying is that we want to maintain this tree line. And then when you read what they say there's an 18-foot high rock wall to the east of the site. So it's not noted on the site plan or anything else. So that's why the comment is that, you know, make sure that wherever we are, we need to know where those things are.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Well, my question is, with Scenic Hudson's restriction on the other property, by buying the property next door, they're basically trying to avoid the issue that Scenic Hudson brought up before. And it seems like I want to look more into the detail as to what exactly Scenic Hudson was concerned with. Can we say something like, it looks like you're trying to do a runaround just by buying the property next door? Or,
Well,
I know
you
that's
know,
really-
it's all owned by this company called Beachstone LLC. They own both sides. So I don't think they're buying the property. They currently own both sides.
Did they own both sides at the time the other section was built?
You know, from my perspective, I know no one's trying to do a runaround here from my perspective, looking at this. It's that I presume that Scenic Hudson must have taken an easement on the site in some way, shape or form. And that's the form of the restriction we're talking about. But when you look at the property map, Rob, can you zoom out?
Yeah.
So when you look at the property map, this site here is owned by Beachstone. This site there, all of that's owned by Beachstone. I would guess that somewhere in here, there's an easement of some sort by Scenic Hudson. And for us to basically try to comment on Scenic Hudson's easement, I'm assuming that Scenic Hudson will enforce their own easements. If you want to add a comment or an advisory comment, is the board should be aware of any conflict with the easement? Is that what you're thinking about, Chair?
I don't know what it says.
I'm concerned about the house. You've got it circled right here under, near Esopus. That looks like a house. And you're saying that's part of the same ownership?
That's correct.
Okay. And this structure with the activity, 80 plus tap room seating isn't going to interfere with the other house that's down towards the river right next to it, just on the other side of the tree line?
Let me see if I can. So this is owned by Christian Brothers, right? All of that property there is owned, has the same ownership as, so what they look like, it does look, it's difficult to tell because there's not a lot of detail in the site plan, but it looks like what they did is they tucked it right in here, right in this area here, which is a good location. It maximizes the distance from this house, and it tucks it in behind a substantial
it's a good location.
section of woods that's in that house. And what we're saying to them is save that woods. You're not going to tear that down. And so that should limit them from impacting down here. Now, the site generally slopes down at a fairly decent slope. If anybody's been up here, it rises pretty quickly. And the site plan shows that it drops off. They're going to level this out and it drops off down in here.
Well, that's why I was concerned about the trees. I think they tucked it in the perfect spot.
I agree. I think so too, Mark.
Okay.
If they're having to clear out pretty much for the septic, they're going to take down trees.
They don't have to. They can go back towards the road.
Their map shows them heading away from the road.
Looks like to this north, not necessarily through the tree line that is obscuring the view.
It's not right. It's going to take out trees to the north, not necessarily trees to the west. And if they leave the trees to the west, I'm fine.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. Leave the trees to the west.
Well, those are tractor trailer bodies there anyway, right? They're probably all going to have to be removed. Probably going to have to be removed and cleaned up. So.
So, I'm sorry, Rob, let me get rid of my stuff here.
I can do that. All right. So any other comments other than what we got? This should maintain existing
not boundaries, but it should be land. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Tree line. That should say tree line.
Okay. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, very good. Motion passes. Okay, now we're on to the town of Lloyd. Any recusals?
Scott McCarthy.
Okay, thanks, Scott.
All right. All right. Short-term rentals. This is from Town of Lloyd. So Town of Lloyd is proposing pretty similar to a lot of other towns. They're going to allow them in the AR2, R1, R1/2, and R1/4 and CV zones. It must contain a residential dwelling unit. They're going to do it via, not through licensing, but via special permit. And it's a 2-year special permit with an annual fire and safety inspections. That's a little different. One of the comments we're going to recommend is that they do a licensing in conjunction with the bed tax. And that will be probably, I guess that would be an annual license as well. probes, they do have some good prohibitions. They automatically are not allowing them in multifamily. They're not allowing them in what are typically commercial industrial properties or structures. Vacant property that does not contain a residential dwelling unit, they just can't put up something and say this is now an STR, and none of the camping or temporary kinds of, put a pop-up trail in your yard and have a short-term rental. They're not allowing that. We recommend as a require mod to that list that any new accessory dwellings, that they be prohibited in any new accessory dwellings as a proclamation of the law. The ownership is pretty standard, allows LLP and LLCs, but they have to disclose the name, and they say you can't have any interest in more than 2 at any time, 1 owner occupied, 1 non-owner occupied. They do reference the bails, the bed tax. They do have a clause for grandfathering through the end of the year. They do note that in that grandfathering that any caps, there's no cap in the law, but if they do enact a cap at some point, that people who are grandfathered in will never be affected by that cap. Max occupancy, usually what we see are number of persons per bedroom. They're doing it on a case-by-case basis, depending on the size of each residence. We're going to recommend that they instead make it a little bit more transparent and understanding by just say, what is your max occupancy per bedroom? Put it right in there. And this way, it's one size fits all. And of course, they'll be providing requiring house rules and different quality of life materials, and they have some enforcement policies in the law as well. So require mods recommend that they set aside the ability to set a cap for non-owner occupied. The other, we said that for new accessory apartments, that they be prohibited. And the max occupancy based on guests per bedroom. And they should set a standard. I forget what other towns have been setting them at, but we can use that. And also, in addition to the special permit, that they do a licensing provision as well.
Rob, the maximum occupancy on guests per bedroom,
Mhm.
can I recommend you change the word bedroom or add sleeping rooms? Because with these,
Yeah.
sometimes you get a living room or an office where they put a couch in there and now it becomes a sleeping room, but it's not technically a bedroom under building code.
So what are you
And-
suggesting we do?
We either change the word bedroom to sleeping room, or we add the word, say guests per bedroom or sleeping room,
Okay.
one or the other, just so you cover it, because bedroom
Got
is
it.
defined under building code.
Mhm.
And in these, many times, there's other areas that become sleeping areas
Got it.
that aren't traditional bedrooms.
Understood.
So one of the reasons that we added the licensing in was, I'm sorry, Mr. Murray's got his hand up. I don't mean to take his place. So Drew.
Yeah.
Go right ahead, Dennis.
And I apologize, Mr. Murray. One of the reasons we put licensing in and to think about this is that what we were talking about is an advisory opinion that actually advisory comment that basically said, for owner occupied, you may want to not have this sort of every 2 years, you have to come back for site plan review or special permits. That for an owner occupied, you could simply license them and let the building inspector make the determination relative to whether it meets the condition. And that way you're being more free with respect to the owner occupied, and you put the onus on the return for site plan review on the non-owner occupied. Just that's the thought here.
Okay, so I'll make the licensing and advisory comment then.
Yeah, but I think the thought that is to think about a hierarchy of approval
Mhm.
for owner occupied or versus non-owner occupied, and then the idea was to basically define that as primary residence.
Hmm.
Those are the two things I think.
Actually, I
that we would
didn't,
make
you
them
know, I
advisory.
didn't look to see if they had, I don't recall them having a definition section. I don't think they define primary residence, and we usually do that instead of owner occupied. So let's make that a required mod as well, that they use the terminology of the primary residence instead of owner occupied. we'll make sure they cover that.
But, some regulation is better than no regulation, so getting the
Right.
town at least this far is
Yeah, pretty good.
helpful.
Okay, somebody else had a question?
Mr. Murray?
Yeah, just, I want to circle back to what we did and discussed in New Paltz. And this goes back to a fire in Esopus where there was a fatality at a short-term rental near Airbnb. Signage of where egress is in the structures. Most homes you don't necessarily need it. There's some homes you do. So maybe some sort of advisory comment or recommendation about interior signage, something along those lines.
A safety evacuation plan. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want those required mod or advisory?
Required mod.
I think safety is
Okay.
important. I
Okay,
would
required
agree
mod
with
it
Mr.
is.
Murray.
Okay, so be it.
All right. Any other?
Mr. Baden?
Yeah, they talk about it's a renewable special use. Is that, am I understanding it correctly?
Yeah, every 2 years.
Every
Yeah.
2 years. Is there a section in the code about what is required for the renewal?
I believe so. I could bring it up.
Okay. That's, it just, if it's a renewable, there should be a section of what the owner has to achieve to get the renewal.
Yeah, I think
If
I
it's
believe
not
there
in
is.
there, it should be a required mod. If it is in there, then that's fine.
So we'll check it, and if it's not there, we'll make it a required mod. Is that okay with the board?
Yes.
Sure.
Brilliant idea.
It's my first one today, Vince.
All right. Anyone want to make a motion?
I'll make the
Watkins.
motion, McLaughlin.
I'll second it, Baden.
All right. Wait, any further discussion?
There is a whole section on renewal permits, just so you know.
Okay,
Alright.
thank you.
Great. All right. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes.
Interesting. And I just found out anything that is a renewal is never subject to a cap. If it pre-existed, if it existed once, it will always be allowed to go forward. So it would only cap if any additions to any new applicants.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, on to the town of New Paltz. Any recusals?
That's me.
Okay, thank you.
Town New Paltz. There's Shapiro and Grimes. And what this is it's part of a single family home, but what they're doing is a pool house. And this is the flood fringe overlay district. So it's all, the whole entire site is in that.
Ooh.
100-year. So the pool house is actually being built to 2.5 feet above BFE. The solar panels are 2 feet BFE, and I believe the pool as well. The issue with this is there is, and let me go to my slides. So you get a sense of this area, and I'll just zoom out to give you an even broader sense of this area. This is a high-risk flood zone that some studies in New Paltz, and I'm going to reference them, that have shown that the number of 100-year floods is likely to increase, and the depth of those floods is likely to become greater as well over time.
Where's the 500?
500's all the way in that orange.
Okay, all right.
And that stripe is the floodway.
Okay.
So, or actually, no, that's that's part of floodway. It is the floodway. Okay. So like I said, pool house is at 2.5 BFE, existing house is 2 feet, panels 2 feet, septic tank is already replaced and approved by the county health department. And I wish I had brought this out. So this is just the site plan of it. And I wish I had brought the report out, and I can share this report with you all. But there was a review of New Paltz, New York flood risk present and future under climate change by Woodwell Climate Research Center. And essentially they looked at basically, the floodplains are developed based on 1984 data. And now we're looking at climate change and, like I said, greater risk of 100 floods and greater depth of 100 floods. So all these comments are advisory to the town, but you might see in 20, 30 years that flood depth rise. So you might want to advise the applicant, they might want to go higher than the standard of 2 feet. And that given the data that the town has themselves developed, and with this report, they may wish to look at enabling higher standards in the fringe flood overlay based on the data that they have. And I'm going to cite this report, and the presentation back to them as part of that. I
Rob,
can't
can you
hear you,
explain what the
Dennis.
pool
I
house
can-
is? Can you
What's that?
explain what the pool house is?
Pool
Because it's not
house.
just a normal pool house.
It's a pool house with same, it's a barn to be placed. I don't know that it actually has an apartment above it. I think they may have removed that bit,
Sure looks like it.
but it's basically, there'll be 2 stories. And I don't think it has the separate kitchen per se, but it may have additional room. So this may be used as short-term rentals as well, but that's pure that's pure speculation on my part, but
I think one of the concerns we had was, it doesn't matter that much if the pool floods, but one of the concerns was does the pool house flood, particularly if the pool house is more than a pool house and it's actually used as a living quarters.
as
That's
Amanda
all.
said,
I mean,
the
they could
pool is
make
gonna
it,
be a
they
nice
could change it
sediment
and just
trap.
make it flood resilient. They could do it that way rather than raise it. They could make it flood resilient, but it's a fairly decent site plan.
Yeah.
Since it's an advisory comment, can we
Yeah, it's advisory.
add
I mean,
that
they're
concern
meeting the
about it being a
regulations.
living quarters?
They're meeting the regulations, and in fact, the pool house exceeds the regulations.
Sorry, we were both talking at the same time, so I don't know if you heard me. Can we add the terminology living quarters in the advisory comment to strengthen the reasoning behind raising it up?
Well, can't we just say it's not a ADU? It can only be used as a pool house?
I mean, the key in my mind is for flood protection purposes, you want to protect the structure. And if it's a pool house, you can make a pool house flood resilient. You simply, it's what's in the pool houses that's a concern. If the pool house is flood resilient, for example, if it has concrete
This is
floors,
what I
those
thought.
kinds of things.
Let me interrupt. The proposed pool house is to replace the existing barn in the same footprint and does not contain any bedroom, and accessory apartment approval is not required.
Oh, that answers
This
the
is what I
question.
thought
We
it
don't-
was, and I remember somebody thought there, and our office thought there was, so, but anyway.
All
Okay,
right, that's
there we
because that
go.
was the,
The existing barn didn't have a kitchen.
no, that's what he's saying. It doesn't.
The proposed pool house, which is
It does
replacing
have
the
a
barn,
kitchen.
does not have an accessory apartment or any bedrooms.
It doesn't have any bedrooms, but it does have space as, it could be used as a living unit. Just, we'll leave it at that.
Got it.
So the advisory comments still hold, but it's not directly related to the pool house. It's related back to that Woodwell Climate Research Center report. If you, could you flip your advisory comments, Rob?
I can.
So the advisory comment here is that the town should consider developing higher standards because of that report. That's all.
Right. I mean,
I
I
mean,
could get
it's
rid
not
of,
really, from my perspective anyway, it doesn't really apply to this site plan as much.
I mean, I could
because
get rid of the first comment if you want
That's-
and focus more on the comments back to the town about the flood fringe overlay and updating that.
The only problem is the referral is from the planning board.
Right.
So I think we should send
I'll
our
CC
comments
the
to the
town,
town board as well,
Sure.
just from an informational. Because the referrals from the planning board, we can send it to the planning board, but they can't do anything about it, only the town
Right.
board
I'll
can.
CC the town board on.
Thank
Good
you.
idea.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it, Watkins.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Okay, now we're on to Plattekill. Any recusals?
All right, this is a proposal. This is an existing building, as you can see. This building here. So currently it's considered accessory and it's being activated as a light industrial use for a pump and tank business. And as a result of it not being accessory, now needs a different setback requirement, which is 26.1 for a side yard. Its adjoining neighbor looks like a not a commercial or not a residential use. There's no county impact on this.
Motion to support staff, Watkins.
Second, Mike Baden.
All right, any discussion on it? Good. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Very good, motion passes. All right. Now we're on to Rochester. I assume you're recused there, Mike?
For the next 6, I believe,
Yeah,
5 or 6.
yeah. Looks like it might be 7, yeah. Yeah, looks like 6. Okay,
All right, so I'll start off with local law O, which is in addition to the town zoning statute with respect to kennels. And it's a pretty standard law with the buffer requirements, no closer than 100 feet to any property. Parking is done according to their parking standards, and they have noise barriers and things of that nature. And that the animals shall be restricted from using kennel areas not fully enclosed in the building from 8 to 8 a.m. My only comment would be advisory on this, in that we recently saw the town of Gardner's very elaborate law with respect to treatment of animals at kennels, and that they should take, and it's just an advisory that they should take a look at that and see if they want to incorporate any of that language from the town of Gardner into this. This is, it's a basic, it does the job, but they may wish to cite state and federal regulations and look at treatment and care of animals in there as well.
Motion to support McLaughlin.
Second, McCarthy.
all right. Any further discussion? All those opposed? Any abstentions? All right, very good. Motion passes.
Rob, if you can send me the link to that or send it along.
Yeah, I will. We
appreciate it.
did refer. I will absolutely.
Thank you.
I'll put a note to myself around this, the vote here. Send to Mike. Okay. Okay, local law P is transfer of development rights and some small changes to transfer of development rights. The big thing they do is actually explain what transfer of development rights is. And for those of you that don't know what it is, it basically takes development rights from more rural areas, large lot areas, and provides for more density in your existing centers, your more urban centers. So what they're doing is they're adding AR10 and the PL10 to the sending property list, which means they can send their density to the receiving districts, and they're removing the AR3 and the AR5 from being receiving districts And preference is being given to adjacent or within the B, H, and R1 to strengthen existing centers. Staff recommends supporting this or approve or no county impact on this.
McCarthy,
Motion to
motion.
support. Second, Watkins.
All right. Any further
Who was the
discussion?
second?
I think it was
Watkins.
Watkins.
Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those opposed? And any abstentions? All right. Very good. Motion passes. Okay, Robert.
Okay, local law Q, this is more detailed, but also mostly very well done law. So first thing, they replaced and repealed it, but what they really did was keep most of it and amend certain portions of it. They made sure that all lot development centers are subject to all structures, including dwellings, and cites all the proper codes, fire, building, and the international code. They did also bring in the Ulster County Community Design Manual to be used for all lot development in addition to minimum development standards and scheduled districts. So basically, they'll have their minimum. What that means is you have your minimum development standards for districts, but when they look at anything, they can use the Ulster County Community Design Manual as part of their zoning code to say, we will consider different elements. Now, what I would also, they may want to incorporate certain images from that to make, they're using it. They may want to identify, they may want to go a little further and identify place types, given that the community design manual identifies place types, and suggest different zoning districts where which aspects of the community design manual might apply better. So they might want to make it a little bit more tailored, so they're not just.
Yeah, Rob, I think as we discussed it, it wasn't related to the design manual. It was related to the siting guidelines, where they could think about adding graphics, which is later on in your.
Right,
in
I
your
know that, but
slideshow.
this is something I'm just thinking right now.
Okay.
That they've
All right.
broadly, the code says we will use the Ulster County Community Design Manual for all lot development, but we know there's typology in it. There's crossroads, there's urban centers, there's new centers. It's like,
all right,
they might want to go a
okay.
little bit further with that. I mean, it's fine the way it
Okay.
is, but they might want to go a little further. And they might want to give examples that just they don't have to, but they could. They also are now allowing multiple permitted uses allowed on one site, provided the underlying development standards are met. They're now including density bonuses for the R1, HB, and AB3 zoning districts for those that have green energy conservation or passive house standards. And basically the planning board needs a certified development incorporate sufficient energy. And that means things like LEED standards, but not only LEED standards, but other things like
Passive house,
geothermal, passive house, geothermal, and et cetera, et cetera. So they'll make a review of that, and it gives them some standards in the code, and it'll give them a 1.5 density bonus. There isn't any density bonus though for affordable housing, and that would be a required mod. That if you're granting out density bonuses, you should also be doing it for affordable housing. There is an affordable housing language in the town code, so there's an opportunity to increase that density.
so
that
we basically want to say that you're saying that if there's not somewhere in the code a density for affordable housing, it should be here. We don't want to say they have to put it here, but if it's not elsewhere, it should be here. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Okay.
opportunity. If
All
you're
right, I'm
granting
fine.
density bonuses, why not?
I'm fine.
do that too? And also, I'll just mention that we saw that overlay district in the town of Sopus earlier this year or last year. Everything blends together for me, but they also use density bonuses for a variety of different design goals and things of that nature. So they may want to take a look at that as well. Here's one standard is all land development with 7,500 square feet or 0.17 acres or more disturbance requires site plan review, with agricultural being exempt. So that's a lot of things. That would include, I mean, that gets where it gets to is your subdivision review. So our subdivisions, what did we say it was? A 6-lot subdivision about, Dennis?
Well, it's gonna, that's the question. The question is how does this work with respect to subdivisions? Are you gonna, when you review a subdivision, you review it in totality? It's generally going to be more than 0.17 acres. So you have to go through site plan review and you have to go through subdivision review at the same time. Or is it the individual uses in the subdivision, which is if an individual house or an individual, is that going to require site plan review? It's not that we don't agree with this. It's just a clarification. That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, but I guess does this exempt subdivision review and how single family home houses as part of subdivision as part of that is the question? Yes.
Well, I just want everybody to think about this, that, site plans only last for X amount of time, right? Subdivisions are pretty permanent, right? So you could go get a site plan review for your subdivision, and because it's going to disturb more than 0.17 acres, and then find out later that, oh, by the way, you can't continue to renew your site plan while your subdivision gets developed. So I think it's a critical clarification, and it doesn't affect the application of this. It's just how you're going to make the two work together.
Right. Other things they're doing is a site plan review required for developing, regrading, or stripping slopes 15% or greater. And they set disturbance limits of 15% of the area for those that have a slope between 15 and 25% slope. And anything exceeding 25 slope must demonstrate no other routing possible. They're providing that hydrogeological studies for any site with the groundwater withdrawals and or on-site sewage disposal flows 2,000 or more gallons per day or in any 30-day period. If an aquifer protection overlay or a low well yield area, New York, I don't know what RWA stands for anymore, groundwater protection plan. So gives the planning board a little bit more power there. These are siting guidelines. These are just general siting guidelines that they're going to use for any development.
And that's the one where we suggested that for these siting guidelines, it would be nice to think about where you can put where you can fit in some graphics.
Right.
But it's not, those are advisory as I recall.
Yes, they were.
But this is a great, it's a really good, it's a simple addition to a zoning statute that tells the planning board what to look for.
Right. They also did something with lot line frontages. So they made them only 25 feet from the R1 and H, which is great for higher density areas, and 75 feet for the PL10, A10, R5I, and then neighbor R. They have some new flag lot regulations, and they also provided some language for the conversion of seasonal residential communities into more permanent residential communities. So they added a multifamily conversion standard where it's allowed, and its density requirements. And we're pretty supportive of that. So required modification, well, good job is not a required modification, but good job. As we mentioned, density bonuses for affordable housing, multifamily, and we talked about they should also consider if they're going to provide affordable housing at those conversion of seasonal dwellings, that should apply to that as well. A SOPUS overlay. Oh yeah, okay. Those are the other factors for granting density bonuses, that the SOPUS has certain design standards that the town can look at. And as we mentioned, the size of lot disturbance, how does this work in conjunction with subdivision approval? And oh yeah, this is one that we saw in the siting standards, fire access, minimizing vegetation clearing along edges and frontages, because under those siting guidelines, they called for, yeah, it said minimize clearing of vegetation at the edge of the road, driveway access with sight distance. They should remind themselves about fire access as well at that same time. And those are the comments.
Well, that supervisor up there in Rochester, it's really nice to see somebody doing their job. And upgrading the zoning and, so a motion to support staff.
Second it, McLaughlin.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, all those opposed? Any recusals? I'm sorry, any abstentions? All right, motion passes. Hey, Robert.
Again?
Yeah, we're keep going here. We're gonna go
Yeah, we
three
got three
more here,
more.
Vince. All right, so this time we got landscaping standards. They are applicable. This was a question that came up during staff time yesterday, but yes, it is applicable to both site plan and subdivisions. The reason there was some confusion is because in certain instances it keeps mentioning the plat. It should say, as advisory comment, it should say the plat or the site plan. So that's consistent if it's going to apply to both. But, so they have new language for landscaping. New language speaks to preservation of existing features is the most important thing. They also require more detailed landscaping plans involving the number of plantings, in addition to the location, sizes and species, as well as existing proposed mature shade trees. During the review process, no trees 6 inches or more removed at a diameter at 4 feet from the ground, and they can't do any grading of the lands affected until the final approval of the final plat, and this is where the site plan should come in. They can do removal of invasive species during the application process. And the landscaping plan has to demonstrate how the building materials, colors, and it blends into natural landscape. Strong preference for native species preferred and be of sufficient size and quality to accomplish the intended purpose. Invasive species are prohibited. Now they go through this one section where they amend it, and in multiple instances, the law goes from, and it says landscaping guidelines at the top of the section. And it says they remove the word should in favor of shall. For example, the first one is the minimum branching height for all shade trees shall be 6 feet. It used to say should. So my comment there back to them is you shouldn't use landscaping guidelines. If you're going to use shall, you should make them landscaping standards.
So it's just a change to the terminology at the
yeah.
It's a label at the top, but not an issue, right?
Yeah, it's just
guidelines become landscaping standards.
It's a consistency.
Okay, I hear you.
Yeah. Preservation of mature shade trees is required unless there's no alternative. Requires landscaping remains in health and growing condition. There is a waiver provision for special circumstances to remove trees. Advisory comments were they should have a landscaping list, native species by soil type.
By soil type? What's that
Did
about?
you say that?
I think that's my confusion. Yeah, that should just a landscaping list. That's all. They should develop a landscaping list.
Okay.
This is not a landscaping list for a plat. It's that they should. The advisory is that the planning board should develop a list of landscaping plants that are acceptable, so that they have something that they can pick and choose from. That was that.
And then it should, it may want to indicate the soil type.
Yeah, we can lose the by soil type. I'm sorry, that's more confusing. It should be.
That was my comment about landscaping guidelines should be standards if they're going to use the word shall. And that clarification on site plan or subdivision, they say at the top of the section that applies to site plans and subdivisions, but then they mention plat at multiple times during it. It should say plat and site plan, or plat or site plan in those references, just to make sure the references are correct. So all the comments are advisory.
Motion McCarthy.
Second, Welton.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those opposed? And any abstentions? All right, motion
This is
passes.
another good job, by the way. We'll say the same thing here.
Yep. Good job.
Okay, local law S.
Don't make his head too big.
Okay, it's not only zoning map amendments, it's actually, I combine them both into one referral, but it's zoning map and some standard language as well, but it all relates two different overlay districts in the town. And one of the things they're doing, and you'll see the standards later on, is they're establishing historic districts that actually already exists. You have that, and this is the Algarville Historic District. But some of the standards they're changing are respect to the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. So they removed the R1 residential district from the scope of the Aquifer Protection Overlay District. They added to the prohibited uses of activities that can occur in Aquifer Protection Overlay. And you can see that list right there. We don't have any issue with that list of as being prohibited within the Aquifer Protection area. Also, and then they bring back in this comment about the hydrogeological study. And there are two different types of uses that where they can require a hydrogeological study at the plan board level. It basically, it looks at mitigations and reduction intensity or denial of the use as necessary to protect the water supply. So it brings in the residential uses with the projected withdrawals or on-site sewage disposal flows, 2,000 gallons per day or greater over a 30-day period. Similar for commercial, mixed use, or industrial, 1,000 gallons per day over a 30-day period. Also, they want to minimize filling, excavating, earth moving to the greatest extent practicable, and minimize any adverse effects on quantity or quality of groundwater to existing wells within 1,500 feet, including quality water introduced from adjacent water bodies. Let's see. Then there's some changes to the floodplain development overlay district. Do you have any comments on this section, Dennis?
No, we're good.
I didn't think so. They also have some amendments to the floodplain. All they did was add no principal, the two structure types in bold there. No principal structures, multifamily dwellings, two family dwellings, or single family dwellings at a density of more than one dwelling per, and they added, it used to be 2 acres per 2 acres. Now it's per 3 acres shall be permitted within the flood plain development overlay district. We don't have any issues with that. And they also adopted a list of prohibited uses, which is extremely similar to what you see in the Aquifer Protection Overlay and other already adopted prohibited uses in the town. So no issue with that. So as I mentioned before, you saw those historic districts. So this is the purposes of that historic overlay. Here, we don't have any issue with this. Yeah. Basically, it's all about protection, enhancing the town's attractiveness, making it harmonious and orderly and efficient growth and development for the town, linkages between past and future generations. So that's all great stuff. And then they have some design guidelines, and it focuses on preservation, minimization of impacts to historic structures and surrounding area, consistency. Any alterations are done with, SHPO, and also all those changes architecturally are done provided by Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties. I'm not saying there that the Secretary of Interior has approval power or advisory comments on that, just SHPO does. There also is
that should only apply to eligible structures, right? That doesn't apply to every structure in a historic district. That's
of course
eligible structures, right? Okay.
Yes, the town does have a historic preservation commission, and what we need from them is, it was a little bit unclear. It looked like a zoning permit was required from the town historic preservation commission. It seemed like it was advisory to the planning board. I think it could be written a little bit better where they write step by step what the process is if something is in one of these historic districts, what that process is, and then it comes back as advisory and they can issue a certificate of appropriateness. I just like it, the language cleared up a little bit.
The question here is who overrules who?
Exactly.
Or are they both equal boards?
Right. It looks like HBC is advisory to the planning board, but it should be really, really clear. Also, there's the economic overlay district amendments too. And you'll remember, if you remember this, we reviewed this a couple years ago. It allows for the adaptive reuse of structures and lands associated with those structures. So what the changes to it are making sure that all other overlay district regulations that they have in the town remain in place underneath this EEO. So for example, the aquifer protection. Parcels consisting entirely of vacant land in an ag district with prime or statewide importance and soil they added this are no longer eligible. And they also added a phrase that says contains natural resources otherwise too valuable. So that's for the town board to consider when they're adopting or adding a parcel to the EEO. They should look at those natural resources, and they have that. And they also added to prohibited uses in the EEO, which includes things like transfer stations, self-storage, and chain retail development for that over 4,000 square feet. So comments, compliments, and we made that historic preservation clarification of the process comment. So really
Motion to
only
support staff. Watkins.
So I just have one question, and it's not, maybe it's just more general, but
I
when you
think we
have
need
a,
a second first.
I'll second
Get a
McCarthy.
second.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, now we'll discuss. Okay.
okay. In the historic
Mhm.
district, it's, I mean, is that typical that it only applies to structures and not to things like a cemetery or a grounds or, you know, rock walls, things like that?
Usually it's usually they're either landmarks commissions, so they usually end up applying to structures, whether it's usual or, let's put it that way. Landmark commissions generally do that. I don't know how the Historic Preservation Commission statute is written in Rochester, if it's written broadly. But typically what I've seen is that they nominate structures or areas. What they do in a district from a historic preservation district standpoint, I guess they could argue that they have a broader charge in there, but I'd have to look at how the commission is formed and what its charge is.
I'd note that in one of the earlier laws, we noted that the town of Rochester is taking interest in existing stone walls and existing hedgerows that are historic, and they not necessarily historic, but have historically been there, and preserving them.
Okay.
Not that that relates to that law, but it is something they're actively doing.
It was just a question.
Yeah.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those opposed? And any abstentions? All right. Motion passes. We got one more for Rochester.
Right. And this one was actually a zoning petition, not one that was presented by the town itself. And this was I believe this was the first addition to the EEO, and it's off Lucas Turnpike, also known as County Route 1. This building here. So they have a woodworking operation. And what they want to do is they want to add to the allowable use list in the EEO are two different uses. And let me go to my PowerPoint. They want to use portable sawmills and solar drying kilns in the EEO district. These really aren't that impactful. Only comment is advisory. If you're doing a portable sawmill, you don't want them, I don't think they'll proliferate everywhere, but you might want to require a special permit for allowing them, and maybe setting some minimum standards with respect to noise control or something to that effect.
Motion to support staff, Vivian.
Second it, McLaughlin.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those opposed? And any abstentions? Very good. Motion passes. Okay, we got two left. Next one's in Shandaken. Any recusals?
Yes, Vivian Welton.
I have to as well for employment reasons.
We're still
Okay.
good. Okay, remember Phoenicia Wellness, we saw this a couple months ago, but the proposal was originally on this side of the street. Oh, wait, let me actually annotate because that what I'm doing doesn't make any sense. It was originally over in here, and we had questions about this whole parking area in there. Now it's moving across the street, and it's moving to the bank, the old bank across the street. So,
The bank on 2 lots?
Hmm?
The bank on 2 lots?
may just be a shift of the parcel line. I think it's more of a,
Okay.
yeah, I don't think it's on 2 lots. So convert an existing bank building to a pharmacy use. So basically our comments are pretty straightforward here. That's the site. You got 6 parking box spaces in the back. You have on-street parking available. Existing driveway. Existing conditions, proposed. Gonna need a little bit more signage and lighting detail than that. But our comments really are respect to lighting. They should do lighting levels, provide cut sheets, and show that they're dark sky compliant, and also just make sure that we know how this whole area has flooded in the past, that the building is flood resilient. In other words, what we mean by that is the way it's designed, in that in case of another flood, that it's designed to be back in operation in the quickest way possible, based on the way it's designed, where you put your electrical, not in the floor, but in the ceiling, things of this nature, how you design the floor in the basement. So I have a chat message here. Okay, any other comments?
Just one, I put an answer to, I think it was Amanda or Vivian that asked the question relative to the purposes of the Historic Preservation Kit
Oh,
in
okay.
Rochester.
Oh,
I
sorry.
put it in the chat just so it's there.
Okay.
That must have been
And-
Amanda. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does say the commission, however, shall have no power to prohibit such plans if they're otherwise acceptable under law. So just be aware that that's out there.
So those are the two comments on Shandaken.
Motion to support staff.
Second, Mike Baden.
Who's the motion?
I'm sorry, McCarthy, I apologize.
No problem.
All right, any further discussion? All those opposed? Any abstentions? Very good, motion passes. Okay, last one is Woodstock. Any recusals? Okay, Robert.
All right. This is an interesting one. So the town of Woodstock is taking a law from the town of Fishkill. And it's in response to the Flower Hill decision, which was it was done in federal court. And basically what was found with it, with the propagation data, is that there's some flaws in propagation data, and that they can be cured by doing what are called drive tests. So I'll get into that, but essentially what they're repealing their law, and let me just go through it because it'll get into the other part later. So they're replacing their law. They're breaking application types 1 through 4. They're calling them types 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. My first advisory comment is that is really confusing. If you have a type 2 tower, when it comes to seeker, you really should consider maybe not calling it type 1 or type 2. You should consider maybe a little different terminology. And that's just an advisory comment for
Rochester did A, B, C, D. And
exactly. I mean, just make it A, B, C, D, or not call it types. Do something else. Don't make it the same language. That is confusing.
So like QRST.
So anyway, so there's co-locations of small wireless, co-locations that do not meet the definition, and this is consistent with the shotgun clock. And they basically put the shotgun clock into the law and linked it up to the different types of wireless facilities. Pretty good. They do have visual impact requirements. Those are pretty standard and what they require for non-small facilities, zone of visibility map and visual impact analysis with photo simulations, alternative designs and color schemes. The town does require alternative site analysis and a typical FCC compliance report and RF tests. Now, this is the different part. So they have what's called an effective prohibition claim. So they're citing some work done by the FCC, which the propagation maps are been shown to be inaccurate, as determined by the FCC. And the FCC themselves recommends no longer accepting propagation maps without supporting drive test data to establish accuracy. And the town goes on to say under what that the planning board has the right to request drive test data and map requirements. And those, and what I mean by drive test is literally getting out in the car, and it has equipment that it could look for capacity, deficiency, gaps in services, drop calls, things, and looking at coverage. So they can require these drive test data. They also have design standards for small and not small facilities. That's fine. They also have something called certification of compliance with the applicable RF radiation limits. And they also provide for random RF radio frequency testing. So that means once a year at the applicant's expense, they can, if they think somebody's not compliant with the RF radiation limits, they can test you, and it's at the applicant's expense, but they can only do it once a year. So comments, my comment about the type 1 through 4, that's a little confusing. And this is our thoughts on it. So you have all these standards that say, okay, we've been given, what it goes back to is, say the applicant says, we have gaps in coverage at the 4G level. The law basically says you can, or the way the court decision looks at it, but you have service at the 3G level. You have different coverage at these different frequencies. That's reasonable enough to deny. You do have coverage, just not at the level you want it. So they can request those standards. Our thought as staff is that the first concern should be visibility. If you can't see a tower and they pass that hurdle, why is the town involving themselves necessarily in whether there's a need for it? If you can't see the tower or if it's adequately screened, I don't know why you need to make the applicant need necessarily to jump through all those different hoops if you have a tower that effectively has no visual impacts, if that's your #1 primary concern. And that usually is with any of these cell towers. I think you're muted, Dennis.
The short, and we're not wedded to this. We're not wedded to this battle, by the way, because I think that's what it is.
That's why it's advisory.
The short answer is that it looks like what we're seeing here is a means to get around the prohibition in the law that basically says that you can't make decisions with respect to cellular towers as it relates to public health and safety. If they meet the RF limits, they're essentially entitled to, you're not entitled to ask the question about this. Right. And so what the communities have done is they said, well, if we can't get to that issue that way, we'll get to them on the basis of the amount of coverage on the coverage issue. And the 5G coverage requires more towers. And so what ends up happening here is that you'll preclude them from building more towers on the basis, and they're at a community scale. These things are literally light poles or on telephone poles. You lose that conversation because you're literally stuck at the lowest level of technology that provides coverage. And that's what the case law says you can do that. The real question is as a community, do you want to do that? Or do you want to basically say that if you can meet the visibility concern, we're not that concerned in terms of the gaps in coverage as it relates to the different types of service that's available. And what everyone explains to us, what gets explained is that your cell phone, if it's designed for 5G coverage and it's not available, will go down to 4G. If that's not available, it switches to 3G, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that you won't get a signal or can't use it in these areas. It's just that you don't have all the bells and whistles associated with it in terms of speed, your ability to do mapping applications, those kinds of things, because you're stuck at the lowest level of technology that doesn't have a gap in a community that is headed in that direction, to use the court case that came out of this. You know, if the board doesn't want to go in that direction and just says, you know, we're fine, just make the comment on the confusion with seeker, we're okay. But one of the things that we think maybe what the board could say is that the first consideration here before we get to the type of gap should perhaps be, is there a visibility impact that's of concern? And if you don't want to do that, that's fine. I mean, we understand that there's a significant amount of presence in not just in Woodstock, but in the community in general that has some concerns about RF and are looking for ways to avoid essentially any more RF emissions in a community. And this statute does that.
I'll make a motion to approve the staff comments as written. Mike Baden.
Second it, McLaughlin.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. All those opposed?
I am.
Okay.
Who is the opposed?
Amanda.
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay. Any abstentions? All right. Very good. Motion passes. All right.
Before we adjourn, if I could just ask one question to Mike, to Mr. Supervisor Baden. What are you going to do when you run out of letters in the alphabet for your zoning changes?
We're going to double letters.
You go to double letters, AA?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to check, you know.
The goal, Dennis, by doing it this way, we're picking off a chapter at a time. And
Oh, yeah.
we're eventually gonna wrap all this up probably into one local law, and you'll get a re-referral back, but it felt to us a lot quicker and easier to do them a chapter at a time, and the public hearing process has proven that to be correct, because we're getting minimal to no comments on most of the chapters. And this way, instead of getting bogged down in one section and everything else gets held up. So we're finding it's moving very quickly. You'll probably get another 5 referrals next month.
Who's writing them for you?
It's a combination of 2 different task force that existed since 2016. And then the town board is taking those 2 reviews and going through each section. So none of it is consultant driven. It's all been done by volunteers.
Wow.
Ultimately,
It's
I'm
an
the one
amazing
doing it.
effort. I just want to commend you, Mike. It really is an amazing effort. You know,
Ultimately, I'm the one taking all the versions and consolidating them, and you know, I'm the secretary putting it all together. Some of the ones are my language because the 2016 code I was chairing, the planning board and the code task force at that time. I was on the second committee, but I was not as engaged. So there's a lot of people involved in making it happen.
Wow.
Yeah, if you can,
No.
for at least for me, I don't know about the board, but at least for me, if you could go back to your community and the group that's working on it and just commend them for the sheer amount of effort and whether we agree or disagree, that the point being is that they're covering topics in such a manner that it literally is maybe a difference in policy, but not a difference in practice.
Well, I will
I'd
say
like
it's
to-
a lot
I
of
agree.
very smart people have been involved in this process.
Right, but I'd like to make a motion and it's for the board to send a letter stating that fact to the town of Rochester.
I was gonna say, yeah, we should do that as a board.
Okay,
I'll second that.
And if you have this roundtable get together, this would be a nice, lessons learned.
I was
best
thinking the same
practices.
exact thing, Amanda. Thank you. I was thinking the same exact thing.
And I will tell you, it hasn't cost the town a dime.
Mike, can I come back to my town board and say that you're revisiting the entire town code of Rochester?
No, we're doing the zoning and subdivision, not the
Okay.
entire town code.
Thank you.
Zoning and subdivision. And we're trying to get it done in 6 months,
Wow.
which is why
good for you.
we have a workshop meeting once a month. And every workshop meeting, I bring 3 to 5 more sections of code to my board and say, roll up your sleeves, we're going through it. And we literally go through every single word and every single section. And sometimes the 5 of us get into some disagreements, but we come to a consensus and then we send it on to you.
So Mike, what's the background of the folks you got? Have they done,
Well, it's people like myself who've been involved in planning since 2003. It's a whole mixture of people. It's 2 current town board members, one who was a town board member at the time, one who was not and now is. There was a contractor involved, a gentleman who's done a fair amount of development. The chair of the Historic Preservation Commission was involved. The chair of the Environmental Conservation Commission was involved. A woman who works as a draftsperson for an engineering firm was involved. Oh, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some other people. So
Wow.
then do you run it past an attorney?
our attorney reviews them and gives us, bullet point concerns, but the town board then basically takes it from there. A lot of it is people like myself who've been doing this now 20 years and don't have the degree, but maybe could have it if we wanted to. So
Cool.
Come up to Sorgies and help us write our code.
Yeah.
when I retire from supervisor, maybe that'll be my next job.
Yeah, start a consulting business.
Yep. But thank
All
you
right.
all.
Mike, you won't retire.
I appreciate a lot of the comments and some of them mirror some of my own concerns, but that's why we send it to you guys to say you either agree or disagree. So, and there's a number that you've come up with that we hadn't thought about. So appreciate that too.
All right, with that, anybody want to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Second, Welton.
All right, anybody opposed to that? Very good. See you guys next month.
Have a good
Good
night,
night, everybody.
Good
Good
night,
everybody.
everybody.